I don't know if you see. We had a conversation, one of the first ones when we were all together, and we started talking. It was with Todd Kleckner,
Uh,
and we were
Right?
saying why don't we see a shot from the this is the North Pole, I believe, but of the sun, like because we were saying that's where all the action would seem to be.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, here's the action. So
Yeah, because I,
it's a composite thing. But,
uh-huh. Yeah, I'd read that one of the probes was specifically wanting to be in the polar region.
hmm
So we've probably got counter rotation there, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on. Harmonic relations, vortex action. Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts, Heather? Since Heather was the finder from, it's my first exposure to it. What are your thoughts on it?
Um, well, it's the opposite, right? It's the south pole of the Earth in the same way that the it's very similar to the south pole of the Earth, and it is I believe it is a composite. I don't know if the stereo has one that actually goes up. No, there's like stereo that's ahead of us, and then stereo that's behind us, and then us that triangulates in order to give us these images. It'd be really interesting if there was more of them, to know if there was actually more another one or something that goes further up
Uh huh.
to gather these, or if these are just because they just say stereo, right? SDO stereo.
hmm
What do you mean further up?
Well, if there's ones that are like north of the ecliptic that actually monitor the poles that aren't like equatorial observations.
Are you talking about the Earth or the Sun?
The sun.
Hmm. Well, those are taken from the pole,
They're
above
taken
the
up
pole.
above. There are ones up at above the top of the pole.
I mean, there was a space probe that went above the pole of the sun, specifically so they could get images and other measurements from that region.
Is SDO? Is that that's the probe or whatever satellite?
Oh, I don't know about that. I
Yeah.
just in one of the many things that we get from the electric universe, they mentioned that there was a probe that was specifically going to the polar region.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that's where this came from.
When was that?
Well, sometime in the last year.
Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe that is right because it doesn't specify stereo A or stereo B. It just says stereo, which is why I figured it was a composite of them.
Well, even the thing is that even from the pole, you know, who knows how they take the images? It's not just going to be like a movie camera running, and composite in terms of maybe combining different frequencies.
Mm,
So I don't know what they mean by composite, but it's not trying to do it from the equator.
okay.
Yeah. But we see. I mean, you see all these. It's the varying movements. As you go radially,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
pretty significant. He gets right in there.
Definitely.
Look at this. Look at just the rates. And I'm not sure what this backspin is. I'm wondering if that's an artifact of the camera or not. Because
What? Oh, you
it
mean the
looks like,
black thing?
yeah, well, it's black, and then it continues to have an effect. So I don't know what
The
that is.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably just something missing from their composite.
Mm-hmm. Got
Because this is
that
under this
radar
is
thing going.
Right. This is like a certain like angstroms, right? So it's like a specific frequency of light allowance. By as far as I can understand, it's something similar to aperture, like the amount of light that's coming in. Um,
Hmm.
dif- Different amounts of different levels of angstroms produce different images from the same image.
Hmm.
So I think this is like 193 angstroms. Let me look up on my phone. That's the red one. But see that, yeah, that pizza slice, and then it's like, so there's a seam there, and you can actually follow the seam around it.
Hmm.
And so that's when I thought it was a composite. As see, look at how it swirls it. It's almost like that seam is stirring it, isn't it?
It feels like, yeah, right, right.
304 angstroms. Wait, no, sorry.
Well, the 4,000 to 7,800 is sort of the visible spectrum, I suppose.
Right.
Because when they well, when they break them down, this red color that tends to come out like that, that's 304. The 193 is that glowy gold color that comes out. So there's, and I'm trying to see, because I've got like this thing about the monitors and the stereos, just stereo ahead, stereo behind, ahead, core. I'm not seeing one. Maybe it's just not added to this specific website yet that monitors them for a polar image.
Hmm. Let's see. Where can I find this?
Here, I'll
I
put the. This is NASA actually. So
Yeah,
I'll put
this is
this.
the NASA.
I'll put this in the chat here.
Um, I use solarham.net. I've used it for years, so there's many other ones, and there's probably other ones that have, but they have real time monitoring on all of the different LASCO, GO, stereo. They monitor space weather, solar storms, things like that. Amateur radio station.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've been using this site for years, and yeah, there we go. Intensity.
So what do they think they mean by Rossby waves?
They've been calling it the
Let's hope.
same thing we're seeing. I mean, they've originally. Now, I am out of my league here because I'm going to I'm going to make assumptions. So I have a feeling that Heather knows more about them than I do.
No, I was actually going to ask you guys about the Rossby waves, and it, who had, if anybody had any more information about what they are, or what, what the.
Let's find out.
It's like they're also known as planetary waves, are a natural phenomena in the atmosphere and oceans of the planets that largely owe their properties to rotation of the planet. Rossby waves are a subset of inertial waves. They were first identified by Carl Gustav Arvid Rossby.
Hmm.
So, like, that's why I mean, I thought, like, that's why I was wondering if you guys had more information, because they're like surface waves, right? Planetary waves. Do they extend further out? Is it completely within the sphere? These are the questions that I've
Oh, so he's talking about things like the jet streams and.
yeah, it says atmospheric raspberries on Earth are giant meanderers and high altitude winds that have a major influence on the weather. These waves are associated with pressure systems and the jet stream. Oceanic Rossby waves move along the thermocline, the boundary between the warm upper layer and the cold deeper part of the ocean.
Hmm. Okay, so they wouldn't. The ones in the atmosphere, are caused by the same thing as on the sun, which is the rotating Birkeland current.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they don't know that.
I mean, this is like super electrical here.
But you see how it all breaks into these You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's got this recursive element to it.
Tur- yeah,
It's,
turbulence,
right,
like in a river.
right. And I really see it here. Like, look, this is current.
Hmm.
That's
Pretty
like
amazing.
actually, yeah, that little spot right there, right in the just down and to the slight left. Like you see the central point of where the actual center of the globe is. You can see where they're all
Hmm.
round, and that's three,
Hmm.
Hmm.
2, 3.
Hmm.
Right. So that is that we're looking at Antarctica.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows the central part of the current is going counterclockwise, and then the next current out is going clockwise. But then it has all that turbulence as it interacts with different things, continents or whatever, islands.
Hmm. Right. It's
Very good.
always this balancing. You know, the balancing
Hmm.
going on.
The digestive center.
Dige-
There,
dige- digestion.
yeah, that's where
Uh-huh.
like how it feels. It feels like this digestion where it like is like taking what it needs and distributing it, and then like you know what I mean. Like and then there's waste product or just like the capacitance, like taking it and just um, making it more reasonable. Like the planet can't hand. You know what I mean? Like the like what's the word I'm looking for?
Equilibrium.
Well, the equilibrium, yeah, but there's like a it's a capacitance, but it's a calibration. There's a type of there's a rectifier. It's like rectifying it. It's taking it and doing what it can with it and distributing it appropriately
Hmm.
where it can be distributed.
Hmm.
Distributed DC
Yeah,
kind of right. So
kind
there's
of. Yeah,
there's energy
yeah.
that's uh, potentially consumable, right? I don't know.
Gee, it looks like they're over on the left. It looks almost like a hurricane starting or something.
Mhm. Right there, up between New Zealand.
A lot of
Hmm.
action in this area these days.
There's always a lot of action, like especially tectonic action
Uh huh.
in that area.
Have you seen some of the Hawaii stuff recently? Just
Mhm.
well, we just dove right in. Right? How's everything going, Richard? Do you have a nice trip?
Yeah, yeah, it was very relaxing just hanging out with some people. And then we went up to St. Andrews for a day just to walk around the town.
Okay. Okay.
I was mainly just visiting with my friends there.
Okay.
He's he's a writer. He wrote Hidden History: The Secret Origins of World War One.
Okay. Okay. That sounds very
Very
interesting.
interesting. Oh, it is very interesting. Turns out it was entirely Britain planned the whole thing.
Yeah.
Germany was doing everything to avoid war, and
Right. We get into the
then
Balfour
they got all the blame afterwards.
the Balfour Declaration.
uh, yeah, that was part of it.
Yeah. It's pretty radical. Yeah.
It's interesting that there's sort of a shadow as the current's going past Hawaii. Then on the left there, it's all blue, like the islands are casting a shadow.
Uh huh.
Mhm.
Interesting.
You can't really see the up and down of the wave in there that way, like you're saying, like this little mountain ridge in the
Hmm.
valleys.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomena there.
It is.
So I'm still this is inverted. So I always how far like the small ones are the furthest out. gotta figure out. I gotta go down. Go away. All right. That's high up. Let's go down.
Mm.
Go down to the surface here. That's more surface.
Wow. Yeah.
There is like a whole little atmospheric mountain range.
Yeah, look at this all the way up there. You can see. I mean, I haven't looked recently, but we might as well do it now. The what's going on. You ever watch Hawaii Five-0?
Not yours.
Why did they name it 5-0?
I like the other one with the orange helicopter.
Oh, which was that? Which was that?
Trying to remember the name of it.
Let's see. It's 80 homes. Let's see if we get a CNN.
New phases crater. Check that one out. Hawaii new crazes fader.
What is it?
Falls quiet. The Independent, right there under top stories, the very first one. Because the beginning indicator of this, when the fissures, before the fissures even first started, they were watching the crater on the top of the one of the volcanoes, and it started to sink. And as it sank, they became more and more alarmed, and that's when the fissures started to pop up. And then when it really sank down, then they started to get worried that it was going to hit the water, the ground, and create more explosive, like combustible plumes when the steam and everything got expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And now the crater's like sinking again.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
There, see the crater, uncovered portion of the crater floor. It started like opening up. You can actually see the rivers, And I read yesterday that it was at a higher temperature, that the lava spewing out was at a higher temperature than they've seen it yet. It's getting hotter.
Mm.
It's really interesting. We have some planetary alignments today, actually, and I was worried about tomorrow. I had this like really strong worry about June 3rd for some reason.
Yeah.
And then, because there isn't a planetary alignment that day, but it's between two. And it also looks, if you're looking at it from a sidereal, or if you're looking at it from a solar. So if the sun is in the center of the map, saying where things are aligned, or if things are aligned from our perspective, if Earth was in the center of the alignments, like how that's all pulling. And June 28th is going to be intense too, because then we get our opposition to Saturn, and our opposition to Saturn is always crazy, and that's more of a tectonic pull than a volcanic pull. So just buckle up. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty intense, and that also aligns with our full moon.
Wow.
So is this a different path than the lava normally follows, or is it just broadened?
I think that it just builds and moves along as it goes. I mean, there's coming up at different fissures, and just like anything, it'll build, and then its path of least resistance will change as it builds itself up.
So it's funny, at one end of over in Kauai, you have water building new channels, and then at the other end you have lava building new channels.
Yeah. And I'm also interested in what other volcanic activity is happening on the planet right now, aside from Hawaii.
Well, no, the Big Island is Kauai is where the floods were.
Right. But I'm just wondering, like, if the Canary Islands, or somewhere on the other side of the world,
Hmm.
maybe because if you could draw a line through it, might.
Here we go. Good old Google.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? There we
What did we do without it?
go.
That.
Yeah, let's see.
Hmm.
See, there's many of these worlds here.
All that.
Oh, so that's the fire rim around the Pacific. Okay.
I've been seeing people post pictures of other volcanoes in other places, but they're not posting. They're not all of them have links attached, so you can't see when it was from or.
Right, right. They look like teepees.
Yeah.
Hmm. So there's Hawaii right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
17. It's pretty current.
Hmm.
That's 5-4.
I wonder what the average.
That's pretty significant.
That was a big
I
one.
felt one. I felt one of those. That's pretty significant.
The one that exploded, the biggest one that was it was a 6.9.
Okay.
It had several 5 pointers leading up to it
Where was 6.9?
in Hawaii.
Uh,
Let me look.
it seems to be along coastlines mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, May 4th was the 6.9 that hit in Hawaii, and then their big eruptions were like the 8th, and
So, I mean, it sure looks like tectonic plate related. And then a lot of the EU people are trying to say that the tectonic plate theory is flawed.
well, it's all flawed. All of it's flawed, but I think that once both sides come to like an agreement that there's both things happening, mainstream isn't completely wrong, and EU isn't completely wrong, and there's a way that these things are interacting together. So I think that everybody's right.
Well, what?
And everybody.
Okay, you sound like you have followed it more closely. What I somewhere I was seeing.
As long as it's declarative, I think it's.
Okay.
This
Well,
is a good point of debate, obviously.
Well, Heather, could you tell us more? What is the EU theory about it?
Well, as far as I could tell, the EU theory is that there's electrical pulses pulling through the planet, right? That cause volcanoes, and that volcanoes are the negative, and then the positive is the atmosphere, and that these things pull on each other and yank to create these types of formations, volcanoes, reactions, movements. They basically, like, they're if you picture it as strings, electromagnetic strings that are all tugging and pulling on things and getting in and get just like the weather. It's basically like ground weather.
Okay, well, no, I know what you're saying there, but I was thinking more. I mean, some people are saying that rather than tectonic plate movement, it's that the Earth is growing in size.
That
was what I was kind of thinking of. that line of thinking.
Well, I've heard that too, and it does make some sense that if everything is expanding, from 360 to 365 days, everything in the whole universe is kind of got that propensity to expand out. That it would make sense that the diameter of the sphere would also change and grow and expand out accordingly, right? That makes sense, and the fact that all of the volcanoes, most of the volcanoes, do seem to be along some kind of coastline or they're like a relief spot along the plates. But the thing is that like these are magma pulled, so they're coming from say like the liquid within the earth. Like we don't have to think of it as like water liquid. It's plasma, liquid lava, magma inside the earth, and that's what's being electromagnetically expressed in these ways. If I think about it as like a body, it would be like the adrenals, it would be like your bile, it would be like the plasma in your blood flow and how it's reacting, where the plate tectonic actions are more skeletal.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the tectonic theory is that at the edges of the continents, you have one plate going under another plate.
Right.
And so that would, where they cross would sort of create an opening between the plates where magma could come up. And that seems to make a whole lot of sense, and it seems to match what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Which would give a lot of strength to the fact that the plate tectonic movement is one of the major factors involved. And then, yeah, okay.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that was all I wanted to say. I was hoping you would add to it or whatever.
Well, but that's why I think that it seems that, and like not to make declarative statements, but really a broken clock is right twice a day. So to say like everybody's right about about this is yes declarative, but it's very broad, and it's there are these spaces opening up and things are shifting and moving, and when they move, things come up out the middle of them to kind of fill in the gaps or create crevices or all of the things that we do see. Mainstream science, they're not like completely, especially when it comes to the actual movements of how these things are working. Like, yeah, we can look at the function, but what is the cause of the function? Right. That's the part that we have been trying to predict, or what the space weather sciences have been trying to understand that aspect of it. What is the cause of it? Yes, this happens, but like the Marianas Trench, like they say that it's where it's one plate slipping underneath of another plate, and the Earth is kind of recycling itself there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll buy that for $1. I could see that, but at the same time, the Earth does seem to be expanding and adding new land as these volcanoes come up and magma comes up and more comes out. Obviously, we're making more land, and there does seem to be, like, I wouldn't say stretch marks, but the motion indicators along the ocean floor is showing that there has been some sort of a pulling apart that looks expansive. I when I look at all these ideas and we see all these things, it's like I can understand, I get it, I can see where these ideas come from. It does look like that, but why does it? That what triggers that motion? What are the things that make it behave this way or react? What is the action that causes the reaction?
Right.
The EU is showing a better, like, oh yes, this is definitely electromagnetic, energetic cause.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that starts as far as the picture that comes together, and this is obviously the stretch, but it's that circuit that we're at least entertaining between the sun and the earth. What is that as far as like what's the function of that thing? What's the purpose of that thing? And then is the action that we're seeing part of a purpose? And that's where it starts getting into pretty interesting questions.
Purpose.
Yeah.
I thought you were the one staying away from declarative.
That's not declarative. That's a question. It's not
Oh,
declarative.
well, to ask it, well, is there a purpose is not declarative. What's the purpose is declarative because it's
Okay, you're
claiming there
right.
is a
You're right.
purpose.
Well, okay. Well, let's go back. Is there a purpose? What's the function, or is there a function, or is it
Right.
random? Seems like there's a function.
There's got to be a function. And I think it has just as much to do with like how much water is being taken in along with the land as that plate slides under the other one.
I mean, it's this observation. This is where the break is. I mean, this is where you start hitting the wave, and it's there's been a point of the observation, the detail of the observation puts this is what it's empirical, puts that the most precise observation, all of a sudden there's a deification of the observation versus like why is it? They always stay away from why, and this is actually part of what my driving inquiry. Why do you stay away from why?
Well, as a reaction to religion.
Of
So it's like
course.
science.
Well,
Science,
but this is.
ever since the 16th century, science has been trying to separate itself from religion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why science stays away from why.
Ultimately has castrated the entire process of what gives anything life.
Right. Right. So I don't know if one was to entertain purpose, I would see it as a descending.
Would you? I see it as an ascending.
Well, I mean, it depends on whether you're looking from the top or the bottom.
Exactly.
I mean,
right.
but I mean, it's like a galaxy cluster creates the possibility of there being a galaxy. Then a galaxy creates the possibility of there being a star. Then a star creates the possibility of there being a planet. And a planet creates the possibility of there being life.
What if it's all?
Unless you
what
want
if
to
it's
say
all
that
life? This is the material versus what if it's all alive?
well, I mean, life as we know it, carbon-based life, can only exist where there's carbon molecules.
This is anthropocentric point of view.
Right. No, that's one thing. See, you and I have different philosophies. My philosophy is to be declarative until I'm proven wrong, which is just which is another. It's just another way to pursue truth,
No, I know. I totally agree.
In my declarations are always conditional on waiting for evidence,
Right.
But I see humanity as the pinnacle. It's just sort of like the Christian. Yeah.
Why? Isn't that arrogant?
Well, I'm not saying that humans are superior to other life, but they're a culmination of certain evolutionary path.
Just this scenario to entertain, but what keeps us from considering that we're each just like cells within another organism?
Well, I don't know.
Isn't that something? Isn't that a valid just hypothesis to entertain?
Well, I mean, but our sociology is so different than that of ants or bees.
How?
We're less coordinated,
How do you know? Well, do you think so?
So that's
I believe in free will.
right.
I think an ant may have free will.
Well, it has intelligence because, like ants, they'll try to move something and it doesn't work. They'll try another approach and keep trying approaches till they find one that works.
They have an imperative for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, they actually show intelligence of a kind of, saying, well, we can't lift it this way. Let's try to push it, things like that.
Right.
But they act like cells of an organism much more than humans do.
So do you think that that might have something to do with the our language and the way that we, because for every, I mean, the way that we think is exactly related to the words that we know or how we use the words that we know. So there was a TED talk recently. This woman was talking about a tribe in an Aboriginal tribe in Australia that refers to everything in a cardinal direction. So they'll be like, my southwest foot hurts, you know?
Oh,
And
right.
like, you know, and it gives them this directional ability in every aspect that the majority thinks is bred out of people. Like we don't have specific sensors, magnetic sensors in an organ in our body that tells us which direction what goes. But this tribe is very adept at doing that because they address everything that way. And so like if like I mean, we do have free will, but maybe we might have more of, if we look at different cultures as opposed to like humanity as a species, and see some cultures are more prone to drone like behavior, collective behavior, and other ones are completely shattered and broke off, like don't they're like nomads, and they, you know what I mean, very seldomly work together. It's more of a independent idea. Do you think that maybe if we embrace, I want to say embraced, but like cultivated these types of things within ourselves, that we might have the abilities that some of these animals do, like they're in us too?
Okay, I would agree with what I think you're saying is that our societies are sort of destroy parts of humanity that you see not destroyed in Aboriginal cultures.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we evolved as one thing about Aboriginal societies is that they're all small units that act cooperatively, um, and that so that we evolved being part of a supportive community. And if we're not in a supportive community, it's sort of like being an orphan. So it's like, compared to Aboriginal societies, we're all orphans, wishing to go back home.
Wow, that's powerful.
I mean, that's what I believe, which I think is kind of the thing you're saying.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because a Native American, I've talked to Dave about this before, but there was a this really wise old man that I met one time, and he gave me all kinds of useful tidbits, and one of them was that love and that trust and respect are the parents of love, and without them, love is an orphan child. And
That sounds right to me.
yeah, and so looking at it in this perspective, the Aborigines um, respect the world, their place in it, and they trust in it and give it their trust, and it can trust them back, that there will be a reciprocation of that. And that is the true love that allows them to be a part of the like the cosmic family that maybe we are orphaned from, because we have lost our trust for it, because we have lost our respect for it. And now
Right.
just
Part of the civilization process is demonization of the past, and separating us from our roots. I mean, the Aboriginals are so interesting. In Australia are interesting in so many ways. I was hearing there was one anthropologist who was spending time with the Aborigines, and he noticed that they were behaving in ways that exhibited telepathy. And he asked them, he said, why are you able to communicate that way? And he said, oh, it's because we never lie and we never have secrets.
Right.
And you could see how, and we all have secrets, and we're at a cocktail party, we're very careful what we say. And so that creates a barrier in our minds, and that barrier, we're hiding ourselves in a way. And that barrier prevents us from communicating openly, mentally.
Because we consciously do not want to be openly communicated with mentally.
Absolutely.
We're threatened by being thrown out of the group. We're threatened by ostracization. I always have trouble with that word.
Here's another awesome quote that I got this week from a quote thing that I get, but it was he who wishes to conduct the orchestra must turn his back on the crowd.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
It's like
So
Well,
Jim Morrison.
right, but like
so
that. Oh, go ahead.
so what is that? Okay, that's an interesting metaphor, but what is it a
Metaphor.
metaphor for?
Right. How does that apply?
I mean,
Because
what's the social implication of that observation?
social implication of that is that we are so busy playing for the crowd that we are like if we truly want to see how this works and truly be integrated into that telepathic openness, right, we have to turn our back on what we think everyone is watching, what everyone is looking at, and actually become interactive with the players of the instruments and allow
In the
ourselves to
process.
be that
With
Hmm.
intention.
with intention, because as long as we are the players playing for the crowd, we're looking at them and it's our expectation of them, so or of that, or what is our, you know what I mean. And if we're part of the crowd, we're watching, and if we're part of the symphony, if we're part of the players, then we have a different part of it. If we are the conductor, we have the choice to either be the observer, to be or to be the person who brings it all together, the person who masters these things. You are the one who tells the strings when to come in, you're the one that tells the horns when to quiet, you're the one that tells these things, and everything is going by your conductor. It's very, I've always thought this was like a
Wow.
very
Gets
strange
back to
word.
EU flags.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, just to jump in this, because it kind of, I think on a side string it does, is Robert Lawler really worthy of some study. I've done a bit of it, and he did it was the Temple of Man, this whole, really in depth transcription basically of someone who had studied deeply the Luxor and that entire thing, and how, and geometrically how that relates. He spent like 10 years doing it and got quite a bit of high accolades for his work. But he spent, of all the things in his recent interviews, the thing that he says is most profound is the time that he spent with the Aborigines. So this
Hmm.
is a guy of deep study who, as far as like consciousness, because he's studying consciousness. So this just kind of to tie back around in a loopy way back to the Aborigines and what Heather's saying. It's like this guy's picking up on something pretty profound.
Yeah, I've just looked him up in Wikipedia, so I can look at that later.
Yeah,
Uh, so he was living in Oroville for a while. I've heard a lot of people have left Oroville.
I don't even know what
I
that
mean,
is. Actually.
well, I think it's sort of a large intentional community in India, I think.
Okay. Uh huh.
I've heard about it from different sources, and one of these things, it's a great idea, but it is disappointing in some ways.
Oh,
And
right, like a utopian kind of.
yeah, I mean, in a lot of those things, what you have is something where they say we have no leaders. You know,
Right.
whenever
Right.
I'm always suspicious when I'm not saying there always has to be leaders, but uh, if there isn't an evident structure, then there's usually a hidden structure.
Right. Right. I mean, you get into that thing where it kind of naturally happens where, okay, this is a big collective, but there's only a few people that are actually the producers. And then
Yeah, or
there's a natural imbalance that occurs.
there's some people that have all kinds of personal influence that ends up being can end up being dictatorial, let's say,
Hmm.
but all with smiles and all
Right. Oh yeah, and
behind
love
the
and love
scenes.
and yeah, it's well, this is the good. Here's the
And
good.
we don't think you're being good enough. You should
Yeah.
leave the community.
Yeah. We're all about love and good, but
But even of course,
yeah.
getting back, kind of going back to where we're talking about cooperative societies, but like Okay, I was reading one book about Crazy Horse, and
Yeah.
so in the Oglalas, um, I mean, there'd still be sort of psychopaths who committed murder and things, um, within that. It's not that everybody was the wonderful cooperative person. There were also, uh, anomalies within that.
Right. Well, it's neither one, neither one or the other. I mean, usually pretty dramatic. There's usually a pretty dramatic event they get pegged into, you know. But
Hmm.
especially when there's that much dynamic going on, right?
Hmm.
Someone like this is kind of a cornerstone, you know, historical
In fact, I think Crazy Horse ended
opinion.
up being murdered by somebody, if I'm not mistaken, by another member of the tribe.
Hmm. What's the story again? Behind? Just trying to pull
Well,
it up.
he was, a leader like, many of the other ones, um, who, defended his people, like Sitting Bull
Mm-hmm.
and Crazy Horse and many others you've heard about, because we in the with being attacked by the European settlers, kind of forced the Indians, the natives, to take on a more hierarchical military structure in order to defend themselves.
Right.
Uh, and suddenly, someone would be given the authority to command several tribes, which didn't exist before the Europeans came.
Right.
It
Right.
was,
Usually because of courage or some type of, obviously, the naming, which is basically an element of their spirit persona, right?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Boy, you're so good at rapidly coming up with data and images for us, whatever we're
Oh, thank
talking
you.
about.
Yeah, well, that's it's for practicing. I've just done it a little bit now. It's really not very hard, by the way. So,
Well, but you're doing it.
yeah, yeah. No, I know. Well, so, someone's got to do it.
Much appreciated.
So,
Yeah,
of course.
Christy. Cheers.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really nice to just kind of re-examine this stuff from our new our current point of view rather than what has been kind of served up a la McDonald's, you know.
Right.
Hmm.
Uh,
So we're
very
at a
cool.
very pivotal time when so many things are being re-examined.
Yeah, seems like it. It's pretty exciting. I mean, I've seen it kind of, grow pretty rapidly over the last 3 years.
Hmm.
They're labeling it the Great Awakening. This is kind of common parlance at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I think I mean the internet has been a wonderful gift. I mean, to those who know how to use it properly, like you're using it, and like to be able to investigate right away, right offhand. So we have this unbelievable tool to learn and communicate. And do you I mean, look, we're talking to you. I mean, we're all in different parts of the earth right now. We're all in different parts of the planet, and we can share with each other these things. It's like, yes, before, I mean, think about how long it would take someone just to get from point A to point B. Grant, that had some amazing benefits that we're lacking nowadays, like the ability to sit quietly with yourself, introspection, patience.
Hmm.
We do live in a society now of like instant gratification, but it's not all bad because we can get to these conclusions. It's like, how do we balance that with the ability to sit with some of these things for a while? Because I know it affects you guys. It affects me sometimes. Like, okay, I need to sit quietly and just digest all of this
It's
for
the
a minute.
hardest. It's the hardest thing. In fact, like that thing is in many ways subverted just because of the way society's structured. You to sit quietly and be able to spend, you know, a, because you're locked into our, you know, your work week, and then you know, here okay, now that we wound you up so hard during the week, now you got to unwind for 2 days and then start over again, and it's you never have that time to get into that, you know, the stillness at all, you know, and that's where the answers come from, it seems like to me.
Yep. Yep. And they say like, oh, you know, they try to remind people to take time for themselves, but then they demand so much that you really can't, or you feel like that 2-day break was actually a rest when it wasn't. It was, I mean, it was, but it just gets you back to where you can start to think again, and then it gets taken away from you again, and it's like, I like the ability to. I try to make that a point in my life. Like I can't work in something that's so high paced and hectic all the time that I lose my mind, because I will lose my mind. You know, I mean, give ourselves the ability to sit and read. You won't believe how I go on these chats. I go on the comment bars, just like open forum things and talk to people, and hardly anybody reads the book. Hardly anybody actually, looks deeper into it.
Right.
And I don't think it's for lack of wanting. I think it's for lack of time. We just don't have the time. And when we do have the time, we're so fried that.
Well, it's like in some sense, I never had the time to really pursue anything until I retired.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you got to write. I mean, writing is obviously that process, right? I mean, where you pull yourself out and then examine it, out of the normal societal time frame, right?
Yeah, and so many, like for myself and for many, it's like the process of writing. It feels more like channeling,
Yes.
Not channeling from some ancient, pharaoh or something, but channeling from your own subconscious.
I think it's
Right.
both.
It's like, like I have an idea and I start writing, but by the time I get to the end, it's quite different than what I had in mind when I started.
Yeah.
Right. It tells you. I mean, it ends up being. I mean, this is what I get. It ends up being like a conversation with the thing. All of a sudden the thing has its own. I've shared this a couple of times. But it's like if I put my intention in it too hard, it doesn't come out nearly as good as if I let it put its intention in and I listen to its intention.
Well, and also it's like, in the case where I've, let's say I've had some serious problem in my life and I wanted to figure some way out of it, I found that if I start writing, then the first couple paragraphs, you might say, are the things that have been buzzing around in my head, worrying me. But once I've written them down, then I get down to what was below that. But I never could have got to what was below that until I had excreted or expressed
Right.
that stuff, that first level of stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll wrestle with something that like it doesn't come out and it just fails. It's total. It's just absolutely a mess. But it's like the process of doing it led me to the next thing that ends up being some like justification for all that frustration.
Mm-hmm. Now, Heather, you keep trying to break in. Go ahead.
I'm just delighted to listen to you. I'm just verbally agreeing, like yes, hey, yes, totally, yes, because that's what it's like. These layers, and it is like sometimes you just have to write down a bunch of whatever crazy crap just to realize like how disorderly it actually is in your thoughts. And then when you sit down, just like you said, these things that have been buzzing and whirling, and you put them down, and then you can, okay, that is the layer. What take each part apart, or what was underneath it that you had no idea was there, and then there's like a relief, and there's this active part, and I definitely think it is channeling. It's channeling, yes, your subconscious. It's channeling all those like file folders that you've got, sitting on the desk in your brain, that how do they relate to one another? But I think it also is like being able to sit there and take your thoughts and channel them through your hands into something visual, and now all of those senses are activated and you can tap into the collective unconscious. You can tap into the universe. You can tap into God. That's how you do it, is through those methods. You are opening those channels and you're writing them down. And that's the same thing through artists. It's that activation of all of those centers, those nerve centers, brain centers, sensory centers, your hands, your eyes, it's activating all of those things. And it takes you out of your ego, it takes you out of yourself, and it puts you into your higher self, the other state, where all of these things can be occupied, so that you can get into the nitty gritty of the thing. And it's this unbelievable relief. And that's why I was like, yes, it just kind of comes out, and it needs to be there. And then when you look at it, you're like, oh, like this is so I had this awesome professor who would tell us to write with vigor, edit with them. And so just let that flow out of you. Don't worry about if you spelled it. Don't worry if there's a period or a comma, or if this even makes sense, because oftentimes, like you're saying, like I'll just write something down, and that paragraph will wind up in the middle or at the end, or it will become 6 different paragraphs. That thing isn't necessarily got to be your opening line. Don't freak out about your opening line or how you're going to start this, because when you go back into the editing process is when you're going back into, it's like a totally different animal, and now you're looking at all of those thoughts and looking at that conversation that you had with the thing, and organizing it from going from the subconscious into the conscious, and how does that communicate to other people's conscious, and yet at the same time tap their subconscious and open that channel for them. That's it's so beautiful. You said it so beautifully. I feel almost relieved now.
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
Oh, I don't know. Have you ever heard of this guy? I've run into him. It's Max Egan.
Because it jumps all around historically, and
They're good. Yeah, yeah, this guy. I've been over the last maybe 2 months kind of linking into him. Let's see his channel here. But he's talking about a lot of the stuff. I would say, as far as like the narrative that we're kind of talking about, he's one of the leaders, or voices of it for sure. Let's see, the Crow House. But he does these radio shows, and they're about an hour long, and it's just his kind of freewheeling dialogue. But he's very articulate. I think he's British, probably. But
Surviving the Matrix.
yeah, see, look at that.
Thecrowhouse.com.
Right, he's right online with you. See, right. You got in order to escape it, you got to survive it, right?
So I wrote this article called "Escaping the Matrix" many, many years ago, and it was there was less stuff going on in the internet then, and it went viral. And I'm just wondering how much that particular article influenced the use of the Matrix metaphor so much now.
Just right.
Open that. Oh.
Well, the weird thing, I mean, just as far as like the repetition, the mirroring goes, it's like, where did they come up with it? The Wachowski brothers.
Yeah,
because it kind of plays pretty. I mean, the first, I wasn't into the, I perused the second one and didn't even take any look at the third one, but the first one was pretty profound, I thought.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, the first one was metaphor, and the other ones were science fiction.
Yeah.
Right.
And not particularly interesting science fiction.
Okay.
In my view.
Right. Right. But I mean, the red pill has become a meme that's gone all over the place. the last
Yeah.
2, 3 years.
And it was drink this and shrink and eat this and grow. I think it's just I think it's just all an adaptation for Wonderland, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're the looking glass.
What's up with that Cheshire cat? I have such a
Can you?
problem with. What's up with that guy? He keeps popping in.
Well, I wonder if there was a psychedelic aspect to the inspiration behind Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
I think so. I mean, but I mean, just to get a little esoteric, but Gödel, Escher, Bach. Have you ever read that, Richard?
Well, I was in the same undergraduate class with Doug.
Oh man. Okay. Wow. What was he like? What was he? I mean, that book was like, it was one of my in college. It was just like, finally, I can breathe with this book.
Uh, he was just a very gentle guy, you know. I mean, his father is I guess famous in some. He was a professor at Stanford. I forget. I think he was into history or something. I'm not sure. But Doug was totally mathematics.
Uh huh. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Did you get to spend time with him at all?
Yeah, I'd
Wow.
hang out with. And he was an usher. He was an usher at my wedding.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then
Awesome.
did I tell you this experience? No, okay, I had a very interesting experience. I was working at Apple, and we had every week there was a seminar where somebody would come in and give a talk.
Uh huh.
And so this one time, Doug was coming with one of his students, and I came in late and quietly came in and sat in the back. And his student was giving a presentation, and Doug was sitting in the first row looking at the student, you know. And at the end of the presentation, I raised my hand and asked a question. And the student didn't quite understand what I was asking. And Doug, without ever having turned around, says, I think what Richard meant. So, like, he recognized my voice, you know. So,
Oh, right, 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 right.
so it was like, you know, it was like I was really chuffed, you know. It's like, here's the guest of honor recognizing me by his voice in front of all these people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt
Exactly.
honored.
Absolutely. I mean, the funny thing about this book is that it's like the thread that runs through the whole thing is like a dialogue, a lot of allusions to Alice in Wonderland.
Ah,
You know.
well, that's one of those books which I bought and started and never finished. I should probably go back to
It's a
it.
great one. It's really great. Yeah. Just as far as like in the introduction to the power of recursion.
Mm.
Hmm.
And
I
then
remember.
and then use of it as a creative tool.
Yeah. No, he's definitely a genius.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It's funny. I mean, it's actually it's got a very light heart to it, along with it goes very deep, but it's also got a light heart, which is really neat. So,
So what? It's all online.
yeah, I got it here. I'll give you a link.
It's funny. It's like it's easier for me to read things on the screen.
Me too. It's very difficult for me to
Uh,
pick up a book these days and physically pick up a
yeah, I
book.
mean, if I pick up a book, I can't read very many pages before I feel kind of fatigued.
Right.
Um, and partly because it's your posture. You're looking down at whereas the screen, I'm sitting in a nice, comfortable office chair, you know, with five wheels and all that, and looking at a light emitting screen, and it's just so much easier to read, more comfortable.
Hmm. I work on
Although,
I work on a projector, so it's like I have a very I decided when I had my pocket was full, so it's like I was in a plane and I saw this chair and it was like $2,500. It's like I have to get that chair. It's like that chair
hmm,
is important, and so that's the chair I live in, and I work off a projector, and it's like it's very difficult for me to look at just a monitor, you know, because it's big in front of me. You know. It's
Oh,
not
well,
that, not, I have a very, very.
is it a projector from behind or in front, or
from
how does it work?
it's from it's behind my chair and it shoots forward
Oh,
and the screen is about probably the horizontal is about 12, 15 feet. But I
well,
mean, I
mean,
have a humble
wouldn't
abode,
it?
but that sounds very exotic. I know, but it's like I have a humble abode, but it's like this is this is it's like right in the front door you come in, and it's like here's where I live, right on this projector.
But, but would it? I mean, is it really better for you than, say, a large plasma display?
It feels better because it's like it's not it's just projected onto a screen. There's not anything coming at me. So I don't know. Whatever.
Well, you're gonna show me that when I visit you in LA.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a great meetup for today. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate letting them go too long because they can get ponderous. So we can leave it for now and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, yeah. Because then you feel like you can do it without fearing that you're gonna lose the whole day, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So anyway, it's been good, and Heather, really good to have you here, and
Yeah, great talking to you, Richard. Always.
yeah,
Glad you had fun in Scotland.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess, Dave, I'll see you Tuesday. Heather, I don't know if you go to the Tuesdays or not.
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. But yeah.
We'll see. We'll definitely do these Saturdays. They've been really fun. So,
Yeah, they work.
with
They've
the-
actually worked better for me because
Me too.
it's a smaller group, and we